and everything is going to be recorded from now on. If you can't hear me, you can if you can't talk, in other words, your speaker's not working, by all means, IM me questions as they occur to you, and I'll try and answer those as I go. But I'm going to crack on, and given that quite a few people didn't manage to attend the first session, I'm going to do a very quick review. So I'm going to share out a whiteboard and do it from a whiteboard, if most of us don't mind me not using PowerPoint at this stage. So let me just jump into the whiteboard. You should see that coming up now for you in a second. And hopefully you'll have my audio. If you have a problem with the conference ID, I'm also broadcasting this on voice over IP.
Hi, Mark.
Hiya, Joy. How are you?
You're on.
Fantastic. You can hear me, can you?
We can hear you. Yeah, I don't know if you just keep the volume can go higher.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, I have my volume right up, so hopefully the call quality shouldn't be too bad. Yeah, I'm right up at maximum. I have the headset on. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just trying to get you up on the projector now. Is everyone else on?
Say again, sorry?
Is everyone else on?
Yeah, it looks like we've got quite a few joined now. I've been speaking to Martin. Sophie is there. We've got quite a few across the globe anyway. So what I'm going to do, guys, is I'm going to kick off. We said what we'd do is we would do a very quick recap on what we covered from the last time. By all means, using IM if you want to send in any questions. And obviously I'll pause and allow you to do questions towards the end. So I'm going to jump straight in. This session primarily is going to be about where SBS doesn't make sense. In other words, moving further on with SBS. So what I might ask you to do is to mute your microphone, if you could for me, if you're not going to ask any questions. And that'll give us a nice, clear audio if everyone's muted. Okay, that's great. Listen, thanks very much. So let me start off. In the last session, we talked about SBS Essentials versus SBS Standard. So I think the first thing we got between Essentials versus Standard is that Standard topped out at 25 users. So as you can see, my drawings are as good as ever. And generally speaking, if we talk about SBS Essentials is a one-box solution. One thing I think that's interesting when we talk about SBS is we often get customers asking us to extend the solution a little bit, and really that's where I want to go today. What we covered off in the last session was the maximum number of users for SBS Standard was, as most of us in the audience know, 75 users. That was our maximum number of users. So really what I'm saying is, if we talk about SBS Standard, 75 users. If we talk about SBS Essentials, we've got 25 users as a maximum. And the other difference that we covered off in the last session was that SBS Essentials has no CALs. It's up to 25 users and it's job done. In other words, if you've got SBS Essentials, then you're covered. You've got your 25 users, and that's the maximum. The other thing we might have mentioned in the last session is that there is no upgrade path from SBS Essentials to SBS Standard. So you really need to get the solution right from the start. If Mr. Customer has 24 users, they're probably too big for SBS Standard. If Mr. Customer has 67 users, they're probably too big for SBS Standard. And I think that's very important to realize. Okay, so thank you very much for those of us who have joined. And just to stop the feedback, I might just get everybody to mute their microphone if they haven't done so already. Great. So next piece really to talk about is, we've talked about SBS Standard, we've talked about SBS Essentials. What I want to talk about is the premium add-on, which we mentioned briefly in the last session. So when we talk about the premium add-on, what can we do with the premium add-on? Well, with the premium add-on, what we can say for argument's sake is that what is included in our premium add-on? So two things are included in our premium add-on. We have SQL, and we also have a 2008 or 2 license of Windows Standard included with the premium add-on. So I think the big thing for me when we talk about the premium add-on is if a customer needs to run terminal services, what do? With terminal services, can we run it on SBS Essentials or SBS Standard? So I think that's a good question. Can I put remote desktop services, formerly known as terminal services, on SBS Essentials or SBS Standard? And as we said in the last session, in no circumstances will terminal services, aka remote desktop services, run on SBS, either Essentials or Standard. And that's a very important point to make, guys, because we use... Hello, thanks for joining us. I wonder, would you mind jumping on mute for the moment, just as we're going through? Obviously, if you have any questions, please feel free to talk away or whatever. So, again, just to reiterate for everyone on the call, we've said that SBS Essentials or SBS Standard cannot be a terminal server. And I think that's very important. How do we get around that? Because a lot of our customers want to have people using terminal services. And of course, we want to sell terminal services. We want to sell additional servers. So the premium add-on for SBS Essentials will allow me to have both a SQL license, and it's important to note that SQL is limited to a maximum of 75 users. In other words, the SQL license that you get with the premium add-on that we've illustrated here, that premium add-on is only available with SQL per user and not with SQL per processor or per core. So if you're looking for SQL and you want SQL for a maximum of 75 users and we want to have it with SBS, the most cost-effective way to do that is to buy the premium add-on. Why is it a premium add-on? Well, we no longer have a premium version of SBS, as some of us know. The reason it's a premium add-on is very much because we have SBS Essentials and we have SBS Standard. The premium add-on, two things, the Windows 2008 or 2 license, plus we also have, as well as that, we also have the SQL Standard for small business. And I think that's important, guys. It is SQL Standard for small business. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is no per processor or per core licensing. So if we talk about a 2-box solution, if this was SBS Standard, because we're talking and moving on to the bigger solutions, let's say this is a 60-user environment. So we're now talking about a 60-user environment. We would have SBS Standard potentially on 1 box. Then we might have the premium add-on on a 2nd box. The thing I want to get across to everybody is the premium add-on only makes sense. The premium add-on only makes sense if you need both SQL and a Windows Server license, as in Windows Standard. The thing to remember is that you also need CALs for your premium add-on, whether you're using SBS Standard or whether you're using SBS Essentials. And the only time I need CALs with my premium add-on are if I want to use SQL that comes with the premium add-on. So let me give you a scenario. We have a 60-user opportunity. That 60-user wants to have SQL and they want to use SBS. So I think it's obvious to everybody on the call that that should be SBS Standard because SBS Essentials tops out at 25. However, this 60-user customer only wants to have 20 people using SQL. That means that they should purchase the premium add-on to get the SQL license and the extra Windows Server license, plus they should purchase an additional 15 CALs with the premium add-on to give them a total of 20 premium add-on CALs. The only reason for premium add-on CALs is to have SQL. In other words, if I just want the 2nd server with Windows Standard, I don't need any CALs. But as soon as I have one user accessing the SQL on the premium add-on, if SQL is running and being accessed, I need CALs to go with the premium add-on. So To give another example, let's say it's SBS Essentials, and instead of 60 users, it's 20 users, and all 20 users need to access SQL. Those 20 users also need CALs for premium add-on. Of course, with SBS Essentials, there's no CALs, so we don't need any CALs for SBS Essentials, but we still need 20 CALs in total for the premium add-on because 20 people need to access SQL. And I think that's very, very important. You need to remember that the whole reason behind the premium add-on is to give SQL either to Essentials or to Standard. Now, kind of moving on from that, we want to talk about virtualization. And again, the good news is, guys, if you're joining me and SBS is not your primary concern, I really appreciate you taking the time to join me. So what I want to do is I want to bring in something that's of interest to all of us, even for larger solutions. If we talk about virtualization for a second.
Hi, sir. Hi, Mark. Sorry to interrupt you there. I had a quick query.
Go first, please. Yes.
Hi. Thanks. So this is Imran from Hyderabad. We've interacted a couple of times. So I have a query on SBS Premium. So let's say if a customer buys SBS Premium on a single box solution, eventually buys a second box, can he use the same license for disintegrating premium from the same box, and can he use it on the second box that he eventually buys?
Okay,
so that's possible.
So that's a good question. So let me try and answer it by first clearing up one thing, I think, for everybody. We used to have SBS Premium, and you could buy SBS Premium as a single SKU, effectively a single SKU in GDICE. However, Premium is only available as an add-on. In other words, Premium on its own really doesn't give you anything. You need, with Premium, to have sold SBS as well. So,
yep.
So basically, here's try and answer your question properly. Let's assume Mr. Customer is buying one physical server.
Yep.
And I think your question is timely because we're talking about virtualization. So there's one physical server, and we want to have the Premium add-on because the customer requires SQL. So what can we do? Well, one way to do it is to have the Premium add-on as the physical server. In other words, sell the Premium add-on as the physical server. So let me explain. We put on this server the 2008 R2 that comes with the Premium add-on. That allows me to turn on the Hyper-V role.
Yeah.
And as you can see, great writing, guys, but that's supposed to be Hyper-V. So we turn on the Hyper-V role, and as everyone on the call hopefully knows, if we turn on the Hyper-V role, we get one virtual license for Windows Standard when we turn on Hyper-V.
Yeah.
Now, if we take the SBS Standard, it has its own license for virtualization. So we can have SBS running itself as a virtual. Now, that is a one-box solution, and there's two ways to go about it, and it depends on the way G is set up in your own environment, or in your own call center. But for example, you could buy the Premium add-on as an OEM solution, and then buy SBS Standard as a volume, and put that as a virtual machine on your Premium box. And that's a good example of a one-box Hyper-V solution. Now, does that answer your question, or am I missing the point?
There is still a little bit of ambiguity on how this works. So what I'm saying is basically there is a SKU in G, which is for SBS Standard with Premium add-on included for a single box solution.
Exactly.
So you get SBS Standard installed, you get media supplied for the SBS Standard as well, SBS Premium add-on as well. So what I'm saying is, if a customer buys SBS Premium on a single box right now, and if he uses it right now, but eventually because Exchange or SharePoint is becoming too intensive on the hardware, he decides to move from one box to a second box solution and disintegrate Premium from the first box and move it to the second box. Is that technically possible to use the same licensing? Is the question.
Okay, so the short answer is yes, because the 2008 R2 license is entitled to go on to a separate box as long as it stays as part of the SBS domain.
Part of the SBS domain, yeah.
So, and again, what I can do offline is I can go through all of the product use rights for anyone who's interested, and we can do this as an email. But the short answer is it's absolutely possible to go from a 1 box to a 2 box.
Okay. Okay, because I remember there was this issue that I had come across when we had the SBS 2008 R2, and customer was not able to disintegrate premium from the first box and put it on the second box.
Absolutely, and that's because premium was a single SKU and it was SBS premium, whereas we're talking about the premium add-on, which is a separate divisible SKU. It's effectively. In G, you guys now have a single SKU to make it easier for the customer because a lot of them want to virtualize. But initially, when the premium add-on was sold, it was designed to allow you to have a second server running Windows 2008 or 2. And that right is still there.
Mm-hmm.
So the short answer is absolutely yes, and I'd be happy to help anyone with that as they're trying to do it. So can I take that and move on a little bit further? And let's talk about...
Absolutely.
And let's talk about disintegrating SBS, because I think that was a really good question. So when is SBS not enough? I think we're very clear, guys. There's a hard limit of 75 users. And realistically, if a customer comes on the phone with more than 65, we're going to have concerns. So a couple of things to look at. If we talk about a slightly larger customer, how do we potentially give them a migration from SBS or an alternative to SBS? So let's talk about alternatives to SBS. And I think the obvious one for a lot of us on the call will be to look at 2008 or 2 SP1 Enterprise. Because with Enterprise, we can obviously run 4 virtual machines. And those 4 virtual machines will allow us, for example, to run a file server, run a web server, run a SQL server, whatever it might be. Now, one of the concerns when we break out like this is the cost. But again, remember that your customers are aware of the cloud. And one of the challenges we have is competing with the cloud. And I think that's fair enough for everybody on the call. We're starting to get customers that are asking for comparisons or saying, do you offer a cloud solution or whatever it might be? Now, I would argue very strongly that from a Dell Microsoft point of view, we can offer a very cost-effective solution, even when it's not SBS, with Windows 2008 or 2 Enterprise. Because I can virtualize 4 virtual servers. I can run 4 Windows servers. Now, you're going to get the counter that Exchange costs money. Google Apps is much cheaper. So the first counter to that for me is Google Apps is a great idea for 4 or 5 users who are not concerned where their data is held. So again, we're not saying that Google Apps is not a good product. What we are saying is that for a customer who has, let's say, 80 or 90 users, we're saying maybe not knowing where your data is held, not knowing what data protection legislation is on your data, and Google refusing to tell you where your data is could be a concern. So I find when I've done calls with your colleagues across the different call centers, and someone mentions Google versus the cost of, for example, putting Exchange on a virtual machine, I've turned around and I've said, very simply, do you know where Google put the information? And for some customers, that's absolutely fine. But for a lot of customers, that causes them great concern. Where is my data? So if we talk about an on-premise solution from Dell and Microsoft, like Windows 2008 or 2, Windows 2008 or 2 will allow me to run 4 virtual servers. Can I expand this solution? Absolutely, because I can add more Windows licensing on later on if I need to, and obviously more RAM. And can I grow this into basically a small data center? Well, of course I can, because the next logical step for this customer is to consider potentially shared storage, for example, like an Equalogic. and going from a single box solution to 2 server solution with an Equilogic in the middle. Now again, I'm cognizant that we're talking about small and medium business. So for a lot of customers, SBS Essentials with cloud will work if they're under 20 users. For a lot of other customers, up to maybe 65 users, SBS with the premium add-on, allowing us to have, for example, 2 servers might work. Or for that matter, what might work very well for us is the idea of having Hyper-V from the Windows 2008 or 2 from the premium working. So my 60 user company can have a single server running 2 VMs or 3 VMs. So we did have a solution a couple of months ago in one of the call centers where the customer purchased 2008 or 2 SP1 Enterprise and SBS. And I know a lot of people are saying, why did they do that? The reason they wanted to do that is they wanted to run 4 separate VMs plus separately run SBS. And given that discounted, the OEM Enterprise came in at about 1,700 euros, roughly speaking, and I know I might be a little bit off, guys, but roughly speaking, it came in at 1,700 euros. Their attitude was, we're now in a position where we can grow our environment. We start off with SBS, but we can run our web server, we can run our file and print server, we can run our terminal services or remote desktop services server, and we can run our accounts on a separate server. And this is a very cost-effective solution. And I think everybody is aware on the call that something like an R620 or even an R420 or similar can pack an awful lot of RAM, can give the customer a very good growth path, even if they're starting off at 40 or 50 users. So really where I want to go is, this is not just about SBS. This is about taking a customer on a journey with virtualization. It's also, I think, very importantly, if you don't mind me throwing up another whiteboard, it's also very important that we look at where cloud is appropriate. So most of us are probably blue in the face listening to people talking about cloud. So cloud, does it have a place? Yes, it does, but it's only a delivery mechanism. Is Dell and Microsoft heavily involved in cloud? Absolutely. But when we come back down to the solution, cloud is just another delivery mechanism. So for most of our customers, should their sensitive data be held on-premise, I think quite a lot of them should have their sensitive data on-prem with maybe a backup to a secure cloud. So backup somewhere in the cloud. Should our customers do a proper consideration between things like Google Apps and Microsoft Office 365 versus Exchange sold by Dell? I absolutely think they should. And most customers want security of data. Most customers want to know where their data is. I think the challenge for us moving forward is we really do want to emphasize storage and servers still have a place in this cloud solution era. And I think we should really be talking about, in most cases, we should be talking about a hybrid offering. And Dell is very well placed to do a hybrid offering. And really where we're coming down on that, guys, is private virtual cloud. We already deliver that from a Dell and Microsoft point of view. If we talk about private and virtual cloud, let me just bring up a private cloud for you. So this is my private cloud. And let's kind of take this conversation up the food chain, away from smaller customers. This is our private virtual cloud. So what's the private virtual cloud offering from Dell and Microsoft? The private virtual cloud offering from Dell and Microsoft is really Windows 2008 or 2 data center, which you're looking at now, running Hyper-V and managed by System Center. I think the big thing to get across to everybody is that System Center is still available for 600 euros, as in System Center Virtual Machine Manager. And let me just see if I can explain that very simply. So System Center Virtual Machine Manager 2008 or2 Service Pack 1, and I know everybody loves that name, it's so easy to remember. The point I'm making is the Workgroup Edition is still available on G, and if I'm right, guys, and someone can tell me on this call if I'm wrong, it should be 600 euros and approximately 500 sterling. This will manage a private cloud of up to 5 physical Dell servers. 5 physical Dell servers can run easily, if we talk about, for example, or 620s or 720s. Potentially that could run 300, 400 virtual machines. And it could start anywhere from 15 virtual machines and up. So I think this is really important because this is real upper small business and medium business. I have a customer in Ireland that has 25 users, and they have 2 Dell servers. They have data center, and they're using an Equilogic. And the main reason that they're using an Equilogic and data center with only 20 users is because they have 7 different ticketing systems. And the ticketing systems used to require a physical server. Now they don't. They simply require a new virtual machine. So where I'm coming from this is, let's create a new virtual machine. This is my private cloud. I really want people to get away from the terminology and understand that a private cloud is another way of just talking about a virtualization solution. And Dell are good at dealing with virtualization solutions. So where I'm coming from is we're now provisioning our new ticketing server. This new ticketing server we're going to install from scratch because the manufacturer has particular requirements of the way we install it. And this particular server, let's say, should be Windows 2008. Anyone not surprised that I chose Windows 2008? I could have chose Linux, but for some strange reason I chose Windows 2008. Anyway, so this is creating my brand new server. My brand new ticketing server is listed here. It's currently turned off. If we look at the settings against this brand new server, you can see that we can choose up to 4 virtual processors, effectively a core on an Intel system. We can choose up to 64 gigs of RAM, and we can use dynamic RAM to give us a startup and then a maximum. So we have a lot of flexibility there. We can also add in additional drives. And I think what I'm really trying to get across, guys, is that from my experience of dealing with TSOs, we're very good. You guys are very good at selling this solution. But this is really private virtual cloud. The point that I would make is System Center Virtual Machine Manager 2008 Workgroup Edition is 600 euros. That's pretty amazing to manage your own virtual cloud. It means that we can offer this solution to some of the smallest customers that you wouldn't imagine. So my virtual machine is ready to rock and roll. Assuming I have enough RAM on this machine, I can then start this up, and up comes my ticketing server ready to be installed. You'll see it start the install process straight away. The point is Hyper-V is included in right down to premium add-on with SBS. We have Hyper-V. So we can virtualize right from an SBS Essentials all the way up to a large data center. And I think that kind of scalability is fantastic. So, sorry, I'll stop because there might be a question coming.
Yeah. Hi, Mark. Imran again. So, if let's combine SBS and virtualization. And I have a question for you on that. So, let's say if there is a client who has about 50 users and is using SBS Premium, okay, and he wants to virtualize this virtualize SBS on a typical high availability cluster setup
Yes.
and have a 2-to-1 architecture.
Exactly.
So what kind of licensing would you recommend? I have a fair bit of idea, but I just want to make sure that, it's
Okay.
properly taken care of.
Of course, and I totally understand what you're saying. So,
And also, is that kind of a setup supported, or, does Microsoft recommend buying complete licensing for Exchange, SharePoint, and SQL?
okay, so a couple of things to talk about. If you have, for example, enterprise on both of those physical servers, you're entitled to run up to 4 VMs on each of those servers. So the licensing is based on the destination. So in other words, if I've got Windows 2008 or 2 Service Pack 1 Enterprise on server 1 and I have it on server 2. So let me just diagram this, guys, and we will jump.
Yeah, we can't see a whiteboard, Mark.
So let me just throw up a new whiteboard and you should see it now in a second.
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
And I think we'll go for red, just so we know it's a new whiteboard. So let's talk about a high available 3-2-1 solution. So let's say it's just, in this case, 2 servers, 2 switches.
2 switches and a SAN.
And a SAN underneath. And let's say it's an Equilogic, for example.
Yeah.
If we run SBS as a virtual, okay, that virtual SBS, if it fails over here, you could argue that the SBS OEM license doesn't allow it to move from A to B.
Yeah.
However,
assurance.
If you have software assurance, so if you put OEM plus software assurance, then you get, sorry guys, my bad writing, but if you put OEM plus software assurance, you now turn that into a volume with software assurance rights. That will absolutely guarantee, without fail, that you can move that SBS from A to B. And I would argue that that's probably a good insurance policy with SBS.
So would you need 2 copies of SBS or just one?
Just 1 copy of SBS, because
1 copy of SBS, okay.
at any one time you're only using 1 copy of SBS. Now, let me try, I want to give, I think this is a great question, because what I want to do is I want to dispel a myth on moving of VMs. So let me just see if I can explain that very clearly. So if I can just grab everyone on this one, guys, because I think you might get something out of this. Let me just give you a scenario. We'll take 2 servers. We have our SAN in the middle. Assume the switch is there, guys. And assume we have virtual servers, and they could be Windows. Let's take SBS out of the mix and just say they're Windows servers. One could be an Exchange server, a SQL server. It doesn't matter. Okay? Now, what's running on this server, let's say, is Enterprise. And on this server is Enterprise. There is 3 virtual machines running on server number 2. There is 3 virtual machines running on server number 1.
Okay.
If server number 1 fails, we will end up with 6 virtual machines running on the second server.
Yep.
Okay? Now, what I'm basically saying is, and hopefully everybody can now see my whiteboard that I've shared it out. What I'm basically saying is, are we licensed with the first server going down and 6 servers now running on the second server?
No.
And the answer is absolutely correct. No, we're not licensed, because you don't transfer the licenses over in the event of a failover. So whether you have OEM or volume is irrelevant in this scenario. So OEM and volume. So guys, could I ask those in the background to put themselves on mute if they're not on? So there's a couple of people not on mute, if you could. Fantastic, thank you very much. But what I'm basically saying is we're going from server 1 to server 2. This server fails, so everything will reboot and come up in about 2 minutes. Will it work? Absolutely. Is it licensed? No. For most customers, it makes sense to put data center OEM on both boxes. And if you've data center OEM on both boxes, you've unlimited licensing rights on any of the boxes. So if, for example, server 1 fails and all of a sudden we have 6, 8, 9, 10, it doesn't matter. Also, if I want to P2V from a physical server up to my new Dell OEM data center server, even though that physical server is OEM, I can still P2V as long as I don't turn it on and as long as I do a Windows repair to remove and change the registry. So what I'm really trying to get across, guys, is if we have OEM data center, even for a relatively small customer, it gives them full portability of all their VMs, including SBS. So one thing I want to try and do is to throw in just another explanation on that, and hopefully I can have everybody on the call. And again, I might just ask someone to turn off their great. So let me give you this very simple. Some of us have heard of the 90-day rule. So
yes,
if we have 3 physical servers, each of those servers running enterprise or data center, doesn't really matter. Okay. One argument for volume would be the transferability rights. So if this is a volume license, I'm allowed to move this off and transfer it to another server that hasn't got a Windows license. And that has to be either OEM with software assurance or volume. Now, that transfer means I take everything off this box. It has nothing to do with VMs. It means the whole physical license of the server gets taken off and moved over to a brand new server. The rule is simple. You cannot move it back within 90 days. That has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with virtual machines. If you've got data center on every box, or if you're under 4 with enterprise, you can move your VMs around as much as you like. And 90-day rules has nothing to do with virtual machines. The 90-day rule is if you're physically taking the whole license off the physical box and moving it to another server. And I would strongly argue if a customer is purchasing 3, let's say, or 720s from Dell, and are putting 3 or 5 years pro support on it, they will not want to move the operating system off those servers for 3 to 5 years. If that's the case, buying volume is a wasted cost. The customer should either buy OEM or they should buy OEM with software assurance. Where volume makes sense is if the customer has a physical server, let's say running as a file server, and they don't know whether they're going to virtualize it in the next year to year and a half, then they should absolutely buy volume. However, if they're buying a 321 cluster and are putting 3 to 5 years pro support on it, guys, can I ask everybody in the audience how many of us would take a 5-year-old operating system and put it on a new server?
no.
And I would guess no from everybody. So I absolutely, from a solution architect point of view, from someone who works with both OEM and volume, I don't understand why someone puts volume data center on a 321 cluster. I also don't understand why a Dell TSR sells a volume data center when that volume data center will be supported by Microsoft and the hardware will be supported by Dell Pro Support, when if it was OEM data center, the support would all be delivered by Dell Pro Support. And I think that's where I'm going with that. So I'm going to shut up now, guys, because I think I've talked long enough, and I'm going to kind of open up for questions either on IM, if you prefer to, and I'll call out your question, or if you just want to shout away and ask a question. So I have a question coming up on IM in a second. Does anyone want to shout? Is there any questions anyone has?
Just a quick question on System Center Essentials. I presume it's going to go end of life very soon. So, will it? Firstly, is it going end of life? And if it is, then will it be integrated into Data Center or Enterprise Edition?
Okay.
Eventually.
Great question. So today, what's slightly confusing is we have the choice between System Center Essentials, System Center Virtual Machine Manager Workgroup Edition, and now the new System Center System Center 2012. So the first thing to say is System Center Essentials is effectively end of life. It will not be replaced. So I have to admit, unless it's a very small environment, System Center Essentials probably doesn't make sense anymore.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, System Center Virtual Machine Manager 2008 or 2, although it's been replaced with the next version of System Center, does make sense because it'll manage in this space small or medium up to 5 physical servers. Whereas System Center 2012 makes sense for larger customers because you can only buy System Center 2012 as a single unit. In other words, System Center 2012 is sold combining System Center Virtual Machine Manager and System Center Data Protection Manager, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
So I'm going to read out a question that I have. The question was, does SQL Express or MySQL work with SBS? And the answer is SQL Express or Microsoft SQL Desktop Edition, which is a free version of SQL, absolutely works with SBS. Does MySQL work with SBS? There's certainly ways to get MySQL to work with SBS. However, I would be obviously more supporting SQL Express or MySQL. The thing to watch out for, SQL Express over MySQL, because I can't really talk about MySQL. MySQL will work in a Windows environment. Obviously, you're going to have to look for support in the community around MySQL. SQL Express works very well with SBS, but if you've got more than about 7 or 8 users hitting SQL, then you should consider SQL for small business. In other words, SQL as part of the premium add-on. So that's great. I think we answered that one. So guys, please jump in with an IM or a question or anything that you like. I think I might have another question coming in now in a second.
Mark, in the meantime, I have a question.
Great. Fire ahead.
To SCVMM, not exactly related to the topic, but in the topic we have discussed something about moving machines from physical to virtual.
Exactly.
So, for example, if a customer have like a 2003 environment and he is planning to move to virtual machines, and he bought a 2008 Windows Server Standard 2008, and he wants to move from physical to virtual machine, does SCV
okay, so I missed the audio at the end, but I think the question is a pretty straightforward one, is if a customer wants to P2V, does he have to use System Center Virtual Machine Manager, or can he do it without System Center Virtual Machine Manager? Perfect, so let me answer that. I've got a physical server. That physical server, let's say, is running 2003 or 2008. It doesn't really matter. And I want to take that physical server and make it a VM. So what tools do I need to make that a VM? Well, System Center Virtual Machine Manager 2008 or 2 Workgroup Edition has a P2V tool, in other words, to take this physical server and make it a VM. But you can also download free of charge disk to VHD, and that's written by Mark Rushnikoff. So it's DISK number 2 VHD for my bad writing. And that disk to VHD will run on anything that supports the volume shadow copy service. In other words, XP Service Pack 2 and above, or Windows 2003 2 and above, and it will actually pause the machine, run while the machine is still running, and create a virtual machine. You can actually try this, guys, on a desktop. This works perfectly fine on a desktop as long as you have enough space. To give you an example, if this server was 50 gigs of data and there's 60 gigs left free on the C drive, the disk to VHD file, it will create a .VHD, believe it or not, that is 50 gigs in size, that you can then put straight into Hyper-V. So disk to VHD is a great tool. It's a free download. It'll allow a customer to P2V before he gets System Center. You do not necessarily have to use System Center, and I have a lot of customers that have a 2-node cluster, and you can cluster, and this is the main difference with Hyper-V over VMware. Hyper-V allows you to cluster up to 16 nodes without System Center. Hyper-V allows you to P2V, allows you to vMotion, as in live migration, and failover cluster up to 16 nodes with no System Center. So this is why I absolutely positively believe for the smaller customers, Hyper-V is still an option, because they need Windows Server licenses, they need to buy those, they might as well use the hypervisor if it's there.
Okay, and one thing, so for example, just on the same thing, if we have like 3 different machines, physical server, and we want it to be moved to 3 virtual machines, so what kind of, how will this SCVMM be licensed if you're not using the digital gate, if you want to do it through SCVMM? How will that be licensed? Will it be 1 license per machine, or we will have to get like 6 licenses?
Great question.
Virtual and 3 physical?
Great question. So to answer the question, I'm going to throw up a whiteboard, and I haven't forgotten about the question that's been typed in, so I'll answer that one now in 2 seconds. So to answer the question, how do you license SCVMM? On G today, guys, if you have a look, you'll see SCVMM 2008 or 2 Service Pack 1 Workgroup Edition. So I'll just say Workgroup. You buy and can only buy 1 for the customer. So the Workgroup Edition is designed for a work group of Hyper-V servers. That so a question came in from Cot Thorson, and he's asking, does VMM Workgroup still exist? So I checked it in the UK price list 3 days ago, and it was on the UK price list. So what we might get you to do, guys, is across the different locations is see if SCVMM Workgroup is still on the price list. At the moment, as far as I know, as I say, up to 3 days ago on the UK price list, it was still there, and it was coming in at 500 sterling and about 600 euros. And my point is, you can only buy 1 of these for up to 5 physical servers. So to answer your question, if I have 3 physical servers, 3 or 720s, and I'm running 60 virtual machines, it's still 1 copy of a workgroup, and that 1 copy is still 600 euros. Is that okay? Now, the other thing I would say, guys, is do remember to answer the question where someone, I think the other question was, I want to run 3 virtual machines in the SBS scenario. So let me answer that one, and we can have a look at it. So if I bring up a new whiteboard, let me do this. And again, thank you very much for asking the questions. So let's take a look. Premium add-on, we're going to do virtualization. We sell it as a 1-box solution. Everyone's familiar with that. We use the 2008 or 2 as the operating system to go on to that physical box. That gives me the right to run 1 virtual 2008. So that's, if you like, the server where I can plonk SQL if I want, or I could use for terminal services. And I also have my SBS, which has its own virtualization right. So that's the 2-box solution. If I want to have 3 servers, one option, for example, is to buy a volume copy of standard. And that will allow me to have 3 virtuals as opposed to 2. Another option, which I think is a better option, if we know we're going to need 3, we will probably need 4 eventually, if not more. We could go with Enterprise OEM on the box. And this is especially useful if the customer doesn't need SQL, because if they don't need SQL, they shouldn't be purchasing the premium add-on. If they don't need SQL, then a more cost-effective potential way to do it is to buy Enterprise, which gives you 4 in its own right, plus the SBS, if you buy SBS. So that's a very good solution for most customers up to 60, 65 users. Another way to do it, if you want to go cheaper again, and I know we like cheap, And sorry, there's a comment here, guys, that there is no VMM workgroup. Will it continue? And I will absolutely be able to tell you there is no VMM workgroup to continue on. So in other words, System Center Virtual Machine Manager 2008 or 2 workgroup at 500 sterling or 600 euros is the last of its kind. So after that, you will be buying System Center Virtual Machine Manager as part of the full System Center 2012. That's why I'm saying customers today who are putting together a virtualization solution, if they want a very cheap management tool, they should rush out and buy the Workgroup Edition for 500 quid if that's what they need to do. For larger customers, we recommend from today that they buy System Center 2012. And I think there's definitely room for a proper session on this. I know I'm kind of jumping into territory away from SBS, but I did promise I would cover off when SBS is not big enough. One thing to note is we can do SBS. So Cott is right. He's saying, in my opinion, there's no Workgroup Edition in 2012. Cott, you're absolutely right. There is no Workgroup Edition in 2012. There is no upgrade path from System Center Virtual Machine Manager Workgroup Edition. I think where I'm coming from is if a customer is a 2-box solution, very small customer, he should get VMM Workgroup 2008 or 2 for 500 or 600 quid before it's gone, because System Center 2012 will be more expensive and is designed for bigger environments. That's really where I'm going. One point I want to make is if you're selling SBS without the premium add-on, can you still virtualize without buying another copy of Windows? So basically what happens is if you want to do SBS standard and you want to virtualize it and there's no premium add-on, you have 2 choices. One, you buy a copy of Windows 2008 or 2 and put it on the box and then virtualize SBS. But I think those of us for smaller customers would say that's an extra 500 euros that the customer doesn't have. Another option is to download and install Hyper-V Server 2008 or 2 Service Pack 1, which is Microsoft's equivalent to ESXi. It is free. In other words, Hyper-V Server 2008 or 2 Service Pack 1 is a free download that will allow you to virtualize as long as you have Windows licenses. So guys, what I'm going to do, if that's okay, I'm about to be kicked out of the room. So is there any last minute questions before I jump?
No.
Guys, thank you very much for joining the call. I hope that was useful. I hope we didn't stray into territory that didn't make sense to you. And we will follow up with the recordings and excerpts of the presentation. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Cheers. Thanks. Bye-bye. Bye.
Bye-bye.